This video is sponsored by Filestack.com. So you're building an application where the user needs to be able to select a file or multiple files from different sources, such as the phone itself, the camera, Facebook, Instagram, or even Google Drive or OneDrive. And you want to know how to implement this feature into your Android application, then you will love this video. And if you're just curious, you will love the video anyways. And I hope you do so. And if you do, then hit the like button and subscribe if you haven't subscribed already. We're uploading super interesting and up-to-date Android app development content regularly. So now let's go ahead and start with the project. All right, so let's get started. Therefore, what I'm gonna need is a little line from the documentation so that I can add the dependency for Filestack in my project. So you can just go to the documentation, then select file pickers here and go to Android. And there you will find further down on the page how to install it. And you just need to add this dependency. That unfortunately will not be enough because we are working with a later version of Android Studio. And this SDK hasn't been updated for a while, but we can still get it running. And I'm going to show you how. So therefore, let's go ahead and create a new project. I'm going to start with the empty activity. And here I'm going to call it File Picker Demo. Once the project is loaded, we can go over to our build.gradle file. Here I'm going to change the compile SDK to 30, the target SDK to 30 as well. And then I'm going to scroll down to add the dependency. And because I changed those targets, I'm going to have to change the core KTX version as well as the app.compat version. And then finally also the material version. So I'm going to use these versions that you can see here. And now I can go ahead and sync my project. If I now try to run it, I will run into an error. So what I'm going to have to change as well is inside of the Gradle properties, I need to add the following line underneath Android use Android X equals true, which is android.enable Jettifier equals true, which has been in this properties file in the past in older Android Studio versions. But as I'm using the, currently latest Bumblebee patch, this is not available anymore. So I need to add this line and I can sync this Gradle properties file as well. Now we just need to make one more change, and that is under settings.gradle, I need to add JCenter. So here underneath Google in the plugin management repositories, I need to add JCenter. And I can sync the settings.gradle file as well. This has been available in older Android SDKs as well, but has been reduced by Google. Add it also in the dependency resolution management repositories, and then you can run the application and you will see that the application starts. So that's a good starting point. Now we can go ahead and use the SDK of Filestack. All right, so this is the user interface that I want to have. I have a floating action button here at the bottom, and I'm gonna have a little image view in the center of the screen. Okay, so let's go ahead and add that. I'm gonna get rid of the text view that I currently have, and instead I'm going to add an image view in here inside of my constraint layout that I'm using. So here I'm gonna use the default constraint layout, then the image view, which wraps the content in terms of width and height. The scale type is set to center crop, and I'm gonna use the default image view ID for it. And this is just where it's going to be positioned, so the image, it should take pretty much the entire screen size. So the image should be constrained to its parent's edges. Next, I'm going to need an image for my floating action button. So I'm going to create a new vector asset. I'm going to use the attach file image. So here I can now add the floating action button. And these are going to be the settings that I'm going to use. With the ID select fab, wrapping the content in width and height, 32 density pixels for the layout margin. I'm going to use a purple background tint. And then I need to make sure that the item is also constrained correctly. The image is going to be our baseline attach file image that we just created. And then tint, so the color itself will be white. The text color, so to speak, or the color of that icon. Now I also want to add a video view for playing videos, and I'm going to set the visibility to gone so we only show it when the picked file is a video, because we want to be able to select different types of files. So let's go ahead and just create a video view inside of here underneath our floating action button. I'm going to set the width and height to 0 density pixel, visibility to gone. It's going to constrain to the bottom of the parent, and the constraint dimension ratio I'm going to set to 6:4. And finally, I'm going to add an image button for playing and pausing the video and set it below the video view. So I'm going to also set it to gone, because while the video view is gone, the image button can also be gone. So the content description should say something like play and pause. The margin will be 20 pixels, so I want to have a distance between the video view and this image button of 20 density pixels. And the visibility is set to gone. The source will be this play button, which is the IC Media Play drawable that you can find under Android. You can download this user interface directly from us, so this entire project actually, from the link in the description below. As we're going to load images from the network, we will need to use Coil. So let's go ahead and add Coil to our dependencies. So here we will need the following line, which will be implementation io.coil -kt :coil :1.4.0. I'm going to make sure that I'm going to use view binding. So that means that we need to activate view binding. So here inside of Android, that's where I'm going to add build features, and I'm going to set view binding to true. And now we can sync this file. So at this point, even if you run the application, we will not see much except for our floating action button, as the image view doesn't have a resource and the video view as well as the image button are set to gone. In the next part, we're going to set up the file picker. All right, now let's take care of the file picker. And therefore I will go to my main activity and create a binding object, which allows me to use view binding. Therefore, I need to import my activity main binding. Then in the set content view line, I need to make a change. I will now use my binding for the content view. Now let's create a method that launches the file picker and begin its implementation by creating different fields that it requires to function. I'm going to call this one private fun launch picker. Now this launch picker needs to know which kind of MIME types it's going to accept. And I'm going to create a mutable list of these items. So we're going to accept PDFs, all kinds of images, so that's what this star means, and all kinds of videos. Next, we need to set up the config, which will be file config. And here we need the config class, which comes from Filestack. So let's import it, the Filestack version here. And then we can use build config dot API key. And we're going to get the API key from our dashboard after being registered. So let's just take care of that real quick. Therefore, let's go to filestack.com and sign up for free. You see, in the free tier, you get a bandwidth of 1 GB, 500 uploads, 1000 transformations, and 1 GB of file storage. And once you are signed in, you will find your API key here at the top right hand side on the dashboard. You can also go to configuration, storage settings, and so forth to make some changes, and you see your usage on the dashboard directly as well. Now inside of our build config, that's where we need to create our API key. So let's set that up. Therefore, I'm going to create a public static final string, which is going to be called API key. And that's where I'm going to enter my API key. As this is a Java file, I'm going to add a semicolon at the end. This should get rid of the error that we had before. So next, we are going to set up the sources that we will accept in our application. And therefore, I'm going to create a sources list, which will be a mutable list of items. And the items are going to be from sources. So you see com file stack, that's the sources that I want to use, dot, and then you can see the different sources that are made available. Camera, device, Amazon Drive, Google Drive, and so forth. So I'm just going to set up a couple here. In my case, it's going to be the camera the device, Google Drive, Facebook, and Instagram, but you can use whatever you want. Now the Filestack Picker has its own theme, which we can customize to suit the theme of our app. We can change the accent color to white, the background color to purple, and the text color to white as well by doing the following thing. So we will set up the theme first, val theme, where we use the theme, which is the one from Filestack, this theme here, dot builder, and then we will use that builder to set, for example, the accent color, the background color, and the text color. Okay, so let's do the accent color first. Here we can use context compat to set the color. So get color, and here I'm just gonna use this as the context and the color white. So we can put that into a separate line and do the same thing now with the background color, where I'm going to set it to purple 700, and then the text color as well, which I'm going to set to white, as I said. And then finally we can build it. So let's build it. Now we have prepared everything that we need to set up our picker. So the picker will be a Filestack picker. Now this picker can be built with the builder, and now we can assign the config to it, which will be the config that we prepared earlier, the sources, which are the sources that we prepared earlier, the auto upload enabled feature, which I'm going to set to true, and then the MIME types that we had set up. So we created an extra variable for that. The multiple file selection enabled, I'm going to set that to false. So I can only select one file, but you can obviously change that. Then we set the theme to be our theme that we prepared. And finally, we're going to build that whole picker. And at this point, we can use our picker to launch it, where we need to pass the activity in which we want to launch it. And I'm going to say this because it's going to launch in the main activity. So this is the method that will launch the picker, but we never called this method. So inside of onCreate, let me just use the binding variable that we set up earlier to use our select fab to set an onClick listener to it. And inside of it, I'm just going to launch our picker. Now the select fab is our little floating action button here at the bottom. That was the ID of this variable. Now finally, we have two more steps to do. And one of them is to go to our manifest. And here we need to make a little change to set up a provider. And here we need to set up a provider. So this will be outside of the activity, but still inside of the application. All right, so let's go ahead and set up a provider. Now this provider needs authorities, which is going to be our eu.tutorials.filepickerdemo. That's the name of my project. And here it will be file provider. And then I'm going to set the name to be androidx.core.content.fileprovider. That's the name of the provider. I'm going to set the exported value to false and the grant URI permissions to true. And then we can set up some metadata. And here the metadata will be Android name, android.support.file_provider_paths. And the resource will be @xml file_paths. Now I need to close the provider here. This metadata will be part of that provider. So let me also close it here. And now we need to set up file paths. So I said that this will be an XML file, which we can find under our resources. So now we just need to create this item. So let's go to our XML folder. So now let's create an XML folder inside of our res folder. So here a directory, which I'm going to call XML. And now here I can go ahead and create a new XML resource file. The file name will be file paths. The root element will just be paths. All right. So now what kind of paths do we want to assign here? Well, we need to set up the external paths. So we create a dedicated file for the file provider path where the images and videos from the camera should be stored. Therefore, I'm going to create an external path where I need to give it a name. I'm going to call it pictures. And then I say where those pictures should be stored. And they're going to be stored under Android data / then the package name that we use for our project, file picker demo in my case, / files / and then I'd say something like pictures should be good. So here pictures. All right, and now we need to close this external path, and now we can do the same thing with another external path, which will be for movies, or you could call it videos if you wanted to. Yeah, maybe videos is better. So here I'm going to select the same folder. This is a folder on your phone, and this one will be under videos. And we need to close this one as well. Now, when running it, I get this error where it says unresolved reference API key. And that's because files under the build folder are generated, it should not be edited. And this is something you can still do, but therefore you would need to make a little change to your build.gradle as well, where you say, where you define that this variable that you're creating should be ignored. So what we can do as a very simple workaround is either do that, as I just said, or we can make it super simple by just creating a variable here. So private val API key, and then assign the API key here, and then use that API key inside of the config. Now at this point, let's run it again. And now we should see that we can open up our file picker. All right, and there we have it. We have our file picker. And now the next step would be to upload and receive files. All right, now let's take care of uploading and receiving files because we want to then display them inside of our project here. Okay, so let's go ahead and first of all, override the onActivityResult method. And we need that because when we use our file picker, when we launch it, it will launch an activity. So you can check it out here. You see it starts with an intent. So if there is an intent, we can get the result. So you see start activity for result, which means that we get this result and we can now do something with it. So I'm going to check if Filestack picker can read result with the request code and the result code that we get from our onActivityResult. Then I want to get the selected files. Okay, so val selections Filestack picker get selected files from the data that we get from the intent. And I want to select the very first selection. So the first item from those selections that the user has selected. And I'm going to create a name for it, which I then want to log later on, at least for now. So let's go ahead and create a little tag that we can use in order to know what we are in. So here at the very top, I'm going to create a little variable that will just give me the class name. So here, private val tag main activity class Java simple. So this will be used for our logcat entries. Now we can jump back to our activity result listener. So here I'm just going to use that log entry with a tag and then the name of what has been selected, which will be the root selection item. So whatever is inside of these selections at the position of 1, because this data has a certain format and it gives us a name. All right, after the file is selected, you will see an upload button on the toolbar that when clicked uploads the file. This upload is done in a background service created by the SDK, which means it is running on a background thread with no user interface and sends a broadcast with the results, which is received through a broadcast receiver, which means we need to set up a broadcast receiver here. I'm going to create a private val upload receiver, which will be of type broadcast receiver. And now this will just be an object. So I'm just going to create a plain broadcast receiver object directly here inside of our main activity. Now here, this object needs to implement some methods. In this particular case, one member, which is the onReceive method. So that's what the broadcast receiver in general needs. So we retrieve the result and files after uploads through the intent using its key, which were created by the SDK and is used to save each value when sending broadcast from the upload service. So here, what we can do is inside of this method, in the onReceive method, instead of having this to-do statement, we're going to get the status, which we can get from the fs constants, which is a constant that is created by the Filestack Android. And you see which kind of constants there are. There are a couple. And we're going to get the status. Then we will get the selection also from the intent, and the intent is a nullable, so I need to add that here. Get parsable extra selection, where we have the extra selection. I need to get the file link, which is a serializable extra, fs content extra link as a file link. We can get the selection name, and finally we can get the handle. So here, val handle if file link is null or blank, and we have this exclamation mark here at the beginning. So we're basically saying if the handle is not null or blank, then we use the file link handle, and otherwise we are going to say no link found. This basically just says where the file is. So that's what the file link is for. And then we can go ahead and log that again. So I'm going to log that as a tag. I'm going to log the handle, the name, and the MIME type. So the selection MIME type. So whatever the item that was selected, what kind of type it has. Is it an image or an IMG file, a JPG file, or is it a MMOV file or something like that? So now we need to register our broadcast, because otherwise our upload receiver will never do anything. All right. So therefore we can go over to our onCreate method, and here we can set it up. So I'm going to set it up just after the content view here. So I'm going to create an intent filter, which will be just an intent filter where I'm going to pass the fs constants dot broadcast upload. So whenever I'm uploading something, and then I'm going to use the local broadcast manager get instance to use the current instance, which is this. So the instance of the main activity, and I'm going to now register the receiver, which is going to be our upload receiver, which is a broadcast receiver, which is the type that register receiver needs. So let's pass that, and then we need to pass in the intent filter, and that's what we created this intent filter for. So let's pass the intent filter into it as well. So let me put that into a second line so we can read it better. So this is the local broadcast manager, which is the receiver record class, which allows us to manage local broadcasts. Now, whenever you register something, you also need to make sure that you unregister it once the onDestroy method is called. So we are registering it in the onCreate method. So now we also need to make sure that we implement the onDestroy method. So inside of the onDestroy, we're going to call the default line super onDestroy, as well as our local broadcast manager, where we need to pass in the instance, as well as unregister the receiver, which is our upload receiver. All right, and that is pretty much it. All right, so now let's go ahead and test this on an emulator. I'm going to select Google Drive. I need to connect to Google Drive, and then once Filestack has access to your Google Drive, you can select files from there and click on Upload. And if you then check your logcat, you will see that the file has been selected. So in my case, fun file for video edited PNG has been selected. All right, and it has been received as well. So this thumb file has been received by my key. So that's my API key, and it has been received. Now, the next thing is that we would like to display the selected file on our screen as well. And that's what we're going to do in the next. All right, now let's take care of displaying what we have selected. So therefore, let's go ahead and first of all, create a couple of new variables. We will need the display URL, and I'm just going to use cdn filestackcontent.com, which is the endpoint. And then we need to have the URL itself, which is going to be, for example, a video URL of type string nullable. And I'm going to use the media player because I want to be able to play some videos, for example. Okay, now the next thing that we'll need to do is to check the MIME type. So if we go further down inside of our upload receiver, we had this object here, and underneath the logged cat entry, I'm going to check the type. So here, when, and here I'm going to check selection dot MIME type contains image, for example. What is it that I want to do? Well, I'm just going to say I want to make my image view visible and the video view invisible, as well as the play button for the video invisible. And finally, I'm going to load the image into our image view. So here, binding image view, I'm going to load. So here we need to use the coil method. Coil allows us to use the load feature with a very simple URL. So the URL handle, and we're going to use a size of 500 times 500 pixels for this image. Okay, so that should happen if it's an image. What should happen if it's a PDF, for example? Well, then it's going to be quite simple. So I'm going to use selection, MIME type, contains, and here PDF. So if it is a PDF file, then I'm going to use browser intent to open the browser with it. This will be using the action view intent. So there's an intent called action view, which displays the data to the user. This is the most common action performed on data. All right, and then I'm going to parse the display URL handle. And then we can go ahead and start that activity. So that should happen if it's a PDF. And finally, what should happen if it's a video? Well, then I'm going to do the, well, pretty much the opposite of what we've done here. I make the other stuff visible. So let me just paste that in here. Selection, MIME type contains video. So if it's a video, we make the image view invisible. We make the video view visible and the play button visible. And here we need to also close this bracket here. Okay, now that we have that, the image was quite simple, but the video is a little more complex. So here we need to get the video URL, which is going to be our display URL handle. And then we can bind that to our video view. So binding dot video view dot holder dot add callback. So here we need to pass an surface holder callback. So let's import surface holder for this. And now the surface holder needs to implement some members. Here I'm going to implement all three: created, changed, and destroyed. Okay, so what should happen once the surface is created? Well, in that case, I'm just going to use the media player to apply something. So if the video URL is not null, then I want to do some action. And the action is going to be, first of all, reset whatever was done before, then set the data source to be the video URL and set the display. And here we need to pass in a holder, and we're just going to pass our holder that we get from surface created. So this surface holder, and then we're going to prepare asynchronously for playing the video. Once the surface has changed, well, here we're not going to do anything, neither when the surface is destroyed. So this is something you can implement yourself if you want to later on. All right, at this point, I am waiting for something to be prepared, right? Prepare async. So if I do that, I can add an onPrepared listener here. So media player dot onPrepared listener. And now I can make this class an onPrepared listener. So let's add that here. So further down inside of our onCreate, I'm going to use my media player, which is this media player here, which is just an empty object at that point. So media player dot set onPrepared listener to be this. So this class, this main activity, will be the onPrepared listener. I will also enable the play button. So binding dot play button dot is enabled. I'm going to set that to true here as well. Now, when we add the onPrepared listener, you can see that our main activity suddenly isn't happy anymore. That's because we need to implement the onPrepared member. So let's do that. OnPrepared, what should happen? Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to also make sure that my play button is enabled once the video is ready, so to speak, once the media is ready. And now inside of our onCreate method, let's give our play button an onClick listener so that we can actually play the video and pause the video and so forth. So here, play button dot set onClick listener. And here I'm going to check if the media player is playing. If that's the case, then pause the media player because we just clicked on the button. So here, pause. And also make sure that we're changing the play button's look. So we don't show the pause media source, but the play media source. So set image resource. And I'm going to use android.r.drawable.ic media play. And now in the else case, we want to play the media. So media player.start. And we want to set a different image for the play button. So here I'm going to use IC media pause. And I'm also going to make sure that the media button, so this play button, will get the play look once the completion of the media player is done. So once the video has fully played. So I'm going to set an onCompletion listener. And here I'm just going to set the binding play button image resource to be our media play again. So this one here. Now there's one last thing, and that is the onDestroy method, because whenever you're playing with media players, you also need to make sure that you destroy them once you don't need them anymore. So here, media player release. And if we now test it, and let's say we select a video, then the video will be loaded and we can hit the play button, and now the video is being played on our phone. And I can pause it. You see the video is paused. I can run it again and so forth. So that's what happens if we are selecting a video. Let's test an image as well. So I'm going to use one of the beautiful thumbnail images that Yannick has prepared. And then you see our video is being undisplayed, and instead we see the beautiful image of Yannick here. All right, and that is pretty much how you can implement a multi-file picker, where you can select files from different kinds of resources and then use them inside of your project. Thanks a lot for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and now you know how to use a file picker that allows you to select files from all kinds of sources, which is pretty amazing. And I hope you can now use it in any of your applications that you are building in the future. So I wish you all the best of luck on that journey, and thanks again to the sponsor, Filestack.com, and I hope you also use the link in the description below in order to register for Filestack, because this really helps us out, because without our sponsors we wouldn't be able to do so. So thanks a lot for watching the video, and I hope to see you in the next one.